Before we get started, just a quick reminder that our producer, Monday Abu's poetry collection called Puri, is now out for sale. Check it out in the link in the description.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast, where every week we talk to folks who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all of which take you one step closer to that feeling of hope. I'm your co-host, Neil Trevetti.
And I'm your co-host, Rini O'Day.
And today we're getting ready to do such a special episode, one that I've been looking forward to for ever since it had decided that, okay, yes, she's coming on. We have Clara Martin with us. And usually, Clara, we introduce the guests, but you have so much going on. I know you're an author and stuff like that, but you're doing so much good work in raising hope and awareness of so many sensitive issues that I thought, why not tell the audience about yourself and introduce like what all you have going on right now, rather than we all try to compress it like in 10 seconds or something.
That'd take us a while.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on. It is a true honor, and I'm very excited I'm very excited to talk with everyone. One of the things that I really think that this world needs a lot more of is hope. And I love the fact that you're doing this, super, super important work of getting that out there. I hope I can contribute to that. Yeah,
Thank
of course.
you.
I am a Navy brat. So I was, my father was Navy. My mother actually served in NCIS before, before it was cool for women to join law enforcement, which is great, except that we can't watch the NCIS TV show anymore because, she'll be like, they would never do that. That is wrong. And I'm like, I was very fortunate, and I earned an Army ROTC scholarship to college. Thank you. Yeah, went to university, University of Virginia, and graduated. Then commissioned into the Army in 2012. That was an interesting experience. A lot of good, a lot of bad. I ended up medically retiring in 2016. I was diagnosed with PTSD from MST, which MST sounds for military sexual trauma. Unfortunately, it's a pretty big problem in the military, as you may have read. And also chronic migraines, which, now my neurologist is like, yeah, it might be an undiagnosed TBI, but at that point, nobody really knew.
Wow.
Got out of the Army and went to work as a sexual assault specialist, which is basically a combination of being a peer counselor and a victim advocate. I was super smart and super, super like gung-ho. And I decided that I did not need any kind of therapy. After what I went through in the Army, that was it was a bad idea. Ended up having a psychotic breakdown about 9 months later, and had to be involuntarily hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. That saved my life. I give major credit to my mother and brother for realizing that was what I needed. But it wasn't a fun experience.
Sure not.
Yeah. I look back and at the time when I was in recovery, and I was in the hospital for about 8 weeks. And when I got out, there was a long period of time where I was just fighting to make it day by day. And I had this incredible combination of fear that I would have another breakdown. I was having flashbacks to the incidents that caused my initial PTSD. I was angry. I was extremely depressed. And the thing about my psychotic breakdown is that, I was hearing voices, I was seeing things, and I was having tactile hallucinations, the whole works. And when you lose that much touch with reality, like, to me, what I saw, what I heard, what I felt, that was reality. And
Absolutely.
it was, well, I was terrified because I didn't know if I could trust myself, even after I got out of the hospital, to see what was real versus wasn't real. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I give a lot of credit to my family. I had an incredible support system. And I slowly just started to re-engage with life, I guess. And, you know, I'd love to talk more in detail about what that looked like for me, but, you know, to fast forward and not make this the longest introduction ever. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. You know, I made it like, you know, 2022, and I've been in full-blown recovery now for, I would consider it like years. I have an amazing therapist, you know, that I still see very regularly. Like, my psychiatrist really works with me. You know, I'm married, expecting my first daughter. And
oh, a little girl.
So sweet.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
And thanks. And, you know, I am trying to do, I hope it's effective. You know, I'm trying to do things that will give back to the community, and also make it, like, fight the stigma that people like me faced. You know, try to kind of identify some of the barriers that keep people from getting the help that they need. And, you know, it's amazing how people, I think, will often genuinely want to help, but they have no idea how to. And there's such a perception out there of mental illness. Like, you know, everybody who's mentally ill is going to fly off the handle. Like, you're not safe around them. Yeah. And it's really frustrating.
That's why we're here, trying to break that cycle. That's when the incident happened. Did you immediately report it? And what did the Navy do?
The Army, in this case. I'm sorry,
Army.
I wasn't clear about that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But, you know, it's actually funny because I had a previous instance in helping a fellow service member report something that happened to her. And the response that we got when we went to report was honestly terrible. Like, I remember sitting in this room with the colonel and the sergeant major of the command we were at. And the sergeant major straight up looked at me and was like, he wouldn't do that. I know this guy, and he would never do that. And I'm sitting here, and, you know, I'm sitting there with my friend, and my friend is, you know, she's kind of like huddled down and just looks like she's been kicked in the gut. And I'm going like, well, you know, he did do it. Like, I don't know what to tell you. The face that you see is not the face that we see. And
that's a
eventually,
perfect way to put it too.
Well, thank you. And, you know, one of the things that I have learned, I do a lot of work now on a crisis hotline. And one thing that I hear very regularly is that this person hurts me, and nobody else believes me because this person seems so nice. And I could get into a whole rant about the dynamics of abuse, but I'll save that soapbox. But yeah, anyway, sorry, going back, you know, eventually there was an investigation that was launched very reluctantly. And
is this on hers or yours?
This was hers.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember writing statements, writing witness statements, and, you know, and then I remember at one point getting a phone call from a major, I believe she was, who was doing who was kind of following up on the investigation. And she told me that actually it was partly on me because I hadn't been a better battle buddy. I hadn't.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, if I hadn't encouraged my friend to report, you wouldn't have known about any of this. But, so when my thing happened, I was very reluctant to file a report. I did not think anything would happen.
Sure.
Well, in the end, the only reason that I filed was because I found out that this guy was going to have a female soldier under his direct command. And I felt that I needed to protect her.
Wow.
Wow. Good for you.
Well, thank you. It was a very long and arduous process. It was not fun. Looking back, I'm glad I did it, but it definitely took a personal toll.
Did he go down for his offense on you? Was he given jail time for that of the military?
No, not enough evidence. Which, I mean, I can.
Wow.
I can understand. Like, I am glad that we live in a place where the presumption is innocent until proven guilty. That makes me happy because if I'm ever in jail, I don't. But at the same time, on a very personal level, to give you a little more context as well, and please remember, I'd gone through a pretty traumatic time.
Of course.
Of course.
But after I filed this report, I showed up for work one day, and the way I remember it, people were just kind of looking at me oddly. And my commander called me aside, and he was like, "I just want you to know this isn't your fault." And I was like, wait, what? And it turned out that the man that I had accused was in the hospital after overdosing on pills. Where I look back now and I realized that what happened was not my fault. But at the time, I felt like a murderer. I felt like I had murdered this man.
Sweetie.
Well, that's why I wasn't there. That's why I am still in therapy.
Of course.
So,
and you should be. Everybody should be in therapy.
Everybody
Every single person on this planet.
Yeah. One of the things that really helped me get through that time, there's this quote that I absolutely love. It's from St. Augustine, which is hope has two beautiful daughters. One of them is anger at the way things are, and the other is courage that they won't always be the way that they are now. I'm paraphrasing a little there, but I think that was what really kept me going during those days.
When he OD'd, he got through it?
He did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was kept in the military.
He was. They ended up finding, when they did the investigation, they ended up finding a few other things that he'd done, which I guess goes to show that, predators are predators, and they will take whatever advantage they can. Yeah. But in the end, he was PCS to another post. So at least, I didn't have to deal with him anymore. But it was an imperfect solution because it didn't solve the problem of what would happen. What about the next one?
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah.
But one thing that
okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, sorry. No. Please continue.
No, one thing that I look back now, and one thing that I actually do take a lot of pride in is that systems are never perfect. A lot of times they're very imperfect, and a lot of times they end up hurting the people they're meant to help.
Mhm.
But, I did what was in my power to do.
Mhm.
And I realized, years later, I didn't immediately med board out of the Army. And I realized that other soldiers, mostly female soldiers, would come to me when they had a problem with sexual assault or sexual harassment, and they were asking me for help. And I realized that, everything that I went through, obviously I'd prefer to have not had to deal with it,
Mhm.
but I was in a position where I could help these soldiers. And I was in a position where they didn't have to feel alone like I did.
Exactly.
Yeah. And even if
Uh.
one person, and you said several of them come to you, and that's great, even if one person can benefit from your guidance or your advice, or just your support because you can relate, then you have made a significant difference for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, thank you. And that's actually one of the reasons that I did write my books. Because it goes back to the idea of, I love to read. It's actually very difficult for me to read now. So I just do a lot of audiobook listening. But
Mm.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
podcasts, audiobooks, awesome.
Mhm.
But I realized that there aren't a lot of books with characters who have some form of mental illness as a main character.
Very true.
True.
Yeah.
And
True.
Very true.
well, and if they do, they're usually portrayed
That's crazy.
Don't
Yeah.
even get me started on that. Yeah.
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 So yeah, I was kind of hoping that, I mean, for one, it was awesome for me because I was just pouring stuff onto the pages. But I was also hoping that someone else would read these books and they'd go like, oh, I'm not alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
Wow.
throw in some magic to make it like awesome,
Yeah.
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 But
Well, I think one of the
That's
reasons that we're doing this is to take that word crazy away from mental illness. And, normal people have mental illnesses just as much as, anybody else out there.
I remember reading at one point, or maybe it was my therapist who told me, I honestly can't remember at this point, but they were talking about the different models of wellness and, how, you can come at it from like a medical perspective, which is more deficits based. So, you're looking at all of the weaknesses that a person brings to the table, or you can come at it from a strengths based. And that just changed the way that I saw myself, honestly.
Yes.
Because one thing that I think that people with diagnoses tend to do, I can't speak for everybody. I know I did this. Like it's very difficult to not look at yourself as just a set of symptoms.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spot on.
But yeah, and it's very difficult. Like, I remember there were days when I couldn't drive to the grocery store because the world, it was too loud. There were too many people. I was jumping at everything and I was scared. And those days I would just sit, I just kind of wrap myself up in a blanket and sit in my chair. And I was starting to view myself as everything that I couldn't do. But the way that they framed this, like the strengths-based thing, they were like, you need to start thinking of the things that you can do. And I realized that, well, you know what? I may be sitting here in my chair, but I can write.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I was interested in knowing, like, just in general, this is nothing specific, but what is the routine way of the army or the military in general to deal with these things? Is there usually the people who deserve to be punished or deserve some kind of, action consequences for their actions? Usually, do they get it, or do they go, free or not getting what they deserve in general? What is the ratio of that in general in the military?
I mean, I wish I could give you statistics. I honestly don't know.
A lot to go through.
I mean, the military justice system is its own animal.
Yeah.
And it does, there's some crimes that are easier to prosecute than others. Unfortunately, and this is one thing that is very true in the civilian world as well, but being on the crisis hotline, I volunteer there as part of the 988 system now.
Right.
And then having been like a sexual assault specialist, it can be very difficult to prosecute sex crimes or domestic violence because they are so traumatizing for the survivor. And it may be very difficult for them to talk about. There may not be a lot of physical evidence. It's kind of easy. It's a lot easier to prosecute somebody who's, stolen from the PX.
Yeah. Ironic, but true. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't get validation from the legal system, that can hurt. The way that I try to look at it now, okay, Mr. Rogers?
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't know Mr. Rogers? But he has this quote, look for the helpers. I try to do that now because the darkness of the world can just get overwhelming. It's corrosive sometimes. It's like acid. And it can absolutely just destroy your ability to see anything good. But I think about people like, you two have a candle, right? And you're using that candle to provide people with hope. I have a friend who's an EMT, she's using her candle. And I really like to believe that there are just, there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there holding candles in some way, shape, or form. And
one of the brightest ones is yours. So.
I'm sorry.
You have
one of the brightest ones is your candle that you're doing.
Thank you. That means a lot. But one candle can't do everything, right? And I remember there were days, especially the early days, when my candle it was flickering, it was almost gone. Yeah. And I'm just lucky that there were other people who they were willing to give, they were willing to help me. They were willing to give a little bit of their own flame, so to speak. You can tell I'm a writer here.
Well, one thing I did want to touch on is that I know that you recently did your first graduate course in mental health counseling. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So all that work that you do and you help others and you mentioned the hotline and all that, what is one thing that you would tell these people who reach out to you that nobody told you back then, but you would have liked to hear it from somebody? What is it that would be that you would tell them now?
I would say that, first of all, I believe you. Your pain is real. It matters. And I can't promise you that the pain is going to go away, but I will sit with you while you're in it. You're not alone.
Oh.
Wow. That's powerful. It really is.
Very powerful. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. But one thing that I have learned is that people, everybody wants to fix their problems, right? That's very human. A lot of people, they have the ability to fix their own problems. And a lot of people would actually prefer to. It's just that it's very, very hard to do it by yourself. Especially, you know, if it feels like, if you're in an environment where it feels like nobody believes you or believes in you. Yeah.
I get that. From the time that your incident happened to the time you had your breakdown, what happened in between and what led to the breakdown?
That's a really good question. And it's funny because I look back and I can kind of see like little signs like, oh, okay, you know, this was a sign that something was happening. And, you know, I think a lot of it, I actually ended up, for the last 6 months of my Army career, I ended up in the WTU, the Warrior Transition Unit, which is like a hospital unit where soldiers who were ill or injured and needed longer term care would go. And at that point, like I was angry. I didn't trust anybody. Like I had awful migraines and the pain would get so severe that I would faint. And when I got out, well, I mean, when I got out of the military, like I was really hoping that I just put it all behind me, you know, that leave it there and just move forward. And what I realize now, like, you're going to carry that baggage. You're going to carry that weight. And by not getting the help that I needed when I got out of the Army, you know, I think part of me just believed that I didn't deserve help. Well, I mean,
Sweetie, I want to give you a hug so bad.
Oh, well, thank you. But, you know, I'm like, you know, I'm in a place now where I can see that. I look back and I see that. And the reason that I say this is because, you know, if I went through it, I'm a human, you know, just like everybody else. And I'm hoping that this will reach somebody and, you know, they'll realize like, wow, you know, I do actually deserve help. And it's not a bad thing to get it. Because, you know, especially when I started working as a sexual assault specialist, like, you know, I loved my work. You know, I really loved it. But I wasn't taking care of myself. I'd get triggered by something that a client said, and I was just, you know, I just tried to ignore it and push through. Ignoring it and pushing through may work for some people. It did not work for me. Yeah. And eventually I think, you know, neurologists and psychologists and psychiatrists to this day all argue about what actually caused the breakdown. I've been diagnosed with everything from complex PTSD to schizophrenia to bipolar to schizophrenia and PTSD.
You're not schizophrenic.
I mean, you know, people are just...
That doctor needs to go back to school.
I mean, psychiatry. It's wonderful, but it's so much of an art too. And then, you know, now the current thought is like, I was actually looking at some notes that my psychiatrist sent over, and they're like, yeah, she has PTSD, she has a panic disorder, she's got bipolar, you know, maybe this TBI thing, which
you're not bipolar either.
I mean, what I've kind of come to the point where it's like, you know what, I do not care what you tell me that I have.
Yeah.
I just want to.
Good for you.
Well, thank you. It's just, you know, I found medication that works for me. You know, I'm very lucky because, you know, I'm stable on that medication. You can call me whatever you want. Like, it doesn't really matter as long as I'm like, as long as
you
I feel
good
healthy.
about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Every woman and man should take a picture from their childhood and tape it to their bathroom window mirror. And every day they see that picture and they don't feel about themselves, or they yell at, they're upset or whatever, look at that picture and say, that is what you're saying is not about you. And it's not.
Well, and one thing that I think that I was very lucky about was that, like my mother, born in the, I'm not going to say when she was born, she'd kill me if she listened to this and heard that. But, she realized that there were things that she wanted to learn, like after I was diagnosed with mental illness. And she went out and she learned them. Like, she made the effort. And I think that is just so powerful, that she believed that I had an illness, and she went through the effort to actually learn about it. If people ever ask me, like, oh, what kind of mom do you want to be? That's the kind of mom I want to be. Just kind of going.
So tell us about, you went into the hospital for a migraine and they ended up.
That was not a fun experience. That was awful. But yeah, at this point I was pretty far gone. I was hallucinating regularly. I had moved out of my family home because I really believed, like, I was hearing voices, and they were they were threatening to kill my family. They were threatening to torture my pets.
Oh, wow.
And it was, and I truly believed that the only way to keep everyone safe was just to leave. So I did. Didn't tell anybody where I was moving to. And the hallucinations really only just got worse from there. Like, I was hearing the voices. They were voices that I knew. And I really did believe that they wanted to kill me, and to kill everybody that I cared about. So I remember calling 911 and just asking the officers, like, begging them to come out because somebody was going to hurt me. And I think I said that there was somebody in the tree outside my apartment watching me. And they came out, they were like, you're on the third floor, that's no way that's possible. So that repeated a few times. I don't know how my mother found out where I was living, but one day I opened the door and she was there. And to give you, like, my mother's 5'4" and maybe 110 pounds, but she just, like, she kicked that door open like she was a sumo wrestler. Yeah. And she tried to take me to Fort Belvoir to get help. That did not work out very well. And eventually I think she realized that I was a danger to myself. So I went to the emergency room for a migraine, but also because like at that point I just wanted to be safe. Excuse me. The voices, I thought that the voices couldn't hurt me. The people connected to the voices couldn't hurt me if I was somewhere like an emergency room. So I was I was in the ER, like, hooked up to an IV when two uniformed police officers walked in. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought that the voices that I was hearing, I thought that they were, that this was them, and that I was under arrest, I was in trouble, and I was going to die. Honestly, at that point I was just in tears. But they handcuffed, one hand they cuffed to the stretcher. The female officer searched me, and then, like, the therapists from the community service board came in and asked me questions. And at this point, when you are cuffed to a stretcher and you don't know what's happening, you think you're gonna die, like, I was just crying, begging to be let go, trying to explain that I had this trauma in my past. And no, they were not listening. I was not very cooperative. And if they asked if I would go to the hospital involuntarily, I was like, no, I'm not. So like, okay, I guess you're going involuntarily then. And that was that.
And that started your journey on getting help.
Yes. It's funny because I actually reached out to the crisis intervention teams in the counties that I live near. And I actually just talked very recently to a CIT training at one of the counties, and I'm just telling my story to to law enforcement. They had county police, they had sheriff's deputies, and I wanted to try to put a face to the quote unquote crazy person, because I think what a lot of law enforcement don't always realize, and I don't blame them for this, like they're seeing people at the worst possible moment of their lives, or one of them, but they don't always realize that people can get better. And that and that the way that you treat a person when they are at the lowest point in their life, that's something that they remember and something that they can carry forward. You treat a person with dignity, and
they're gonna
Yeah.
listen to you more so.
I know there's probably not one moment, because these things are always a period over time, but can you put like a timeline on when did the first like signs of hope enter your mind and heart? Like when did you start feeling that, not like everything's fine now. Of course, it's never that easy, never that soon. Everything is always a work in progress, and it takes a long time. But just those first signs of, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and even if there's going to be more hardships or whatever comes my way, I'm going to be okay. I can deal with this. Is there like a specific time period, not a specific one moment, but just kind of an overall general time where you started feeling that?
Yes, actually. And it's funny because, healing's not linear. That's a quote I stole from somebody. Yeah. But it's not linear.
That's true though.
Yeah.
It's bang on. Yeah.
But, I think back to being in the Army, and just struggling, just basically like pulling myself by my fingernails to get from one day to another. And I remember there was this one moment that I was out kayaking, and this dolphin just appeared in front of my kayak. Well, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt connected to the world.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, it was a long time before I felt that feeling of connection again. But I remembered it, and I knew it could happen.
Yeah.
And that was really, really powerful. And then as I slowly got better, I found myself, like I'd go out on hikes, I'd play with the cats or the dogs. And I felt more and more a part of the world and not something alien.
You are an amazing, lovely person.
Thank you too for your, like, honestly, it's bravery. Doing a podcast like this, you're putting yourself out in the world, and I really admire that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So if people wanted to contact you, well, she's about to have a baby, or do you do social media?
I do. Yeah. You can find me on my Facebook.
Okay.
It's, I'm Clara Martin, author. And I
do you
post,
have your books?
I post, there's a link to my books there. And I also do a lot of blog writing. So you can read
Yeah.
that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love to hear
Please read her blog, folks. Please do that.
Well,
Oh.
Clara, I wish you all the happiness and joy in the world, because
Thank
if
you.
anybody deserves it, you do.